Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Gil Zilberfeld. I'm the product manager at Typemock. Today I'm going to talk about the experiences I had and walking through the Agile world, learning what works and what doesn't and what can be improved. So this presentation is about doing stuff better in Agile environment. It's not going to be an Agile primer or a Scrum primer or introduction. It is intended for both beginners in Agilism and those who already have some kind of process out there. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you won't bore you to death. So let's start. And our story begins, of course, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we had the Agile term was born. It was in Snowbird, Utah. It was 10 years and change from where we are right now, where through some very bright people came together and shared their experiences, each from his experience. They were already doing these kind of practices, like Kent Beck doing XP, for example. And they discussed together all these things that everyone was calling in a different name, and the term Agile was born. And you see the Agile Manifesto on the screen. I hope everyone has read and memorized it. It was a seminal moment and basically gave birth to what we think we know about Agile today. And I want to share with you this thing that you now see on the screen regarding Agile adoption. This is from a Dr. Dobbs and Forrester Research survey they were doing late 2009. As you can see on the screen, basically what you have here are in blue you have what we know as formal Agile practices from what we usually know. You see in the light blue here something that people call, I do not use a formal process methodology. The green parts here are some kind of iterative process, although not formally an Agile named methodology. And then there are some people who still admit they're doing waterfall. Well, waterfall, CMMI, ISO, stuff like that. Now, if you're good at math like me, if you take these 35% people here who's doing Agile, and you add to them the 21% who's doing some kind of an iterative process, you get to more than 50% doing Agile, or some kind of Agile process. Well, that's one way you can interpret that. But let's go with this assumption that it actually is like that. And that means that Agile really has gone mainstream. So 10 years later, many people are doing Agile. And this has actually changed the way we're introducing Agile methodologies into organization. Because the old ways were starting at the bottom, usually started from developers or team leaders who read about unit testing or about Scrum, and they decided that they're going to do this their way. And this was actually mostly doing an uphill battle, because Agile is a set of practices or ideas that now these are new things that you're trying to introduce, both to your peers and of course to higher management. And the bigger the change, the bigger the problems you have. And I can tell you from my experience that when it worked, it actually was based on results. Well, it doesn't surprise anyone. But you're at the correct place to actually show results because you're on the operations floor. You're actually in charge of doing the software, so you can actually prepare software correctly, let's say, provide demos iteratively, and if it works, which maybe sometimes depending on the how tough the confrontation that you have, you really are able to grow. And when this happened, you can actually, I don't know, get promoted and start influencing other parts of the organizations. Now that we have Agile in the mainstream, though, we have another option, which starts to happen quite a lot, where Agile comes from the top. Now, when it does, that means there's an organizational decision. We are going to change the way we are going to work. There's going to be backing there. There's going to be a lot less confrontations for a team lead who actually wants to do the changes, because this is an organizational decision. There is money put there. When you get the proper trainers, it will actually help you. The reason I put the question mark here is because what also happened during the last 10 years is that one Agile methodology came up winning before all the rest, and this is of course Scrum. And because Scrum is the only methodology, the other methodology that doesn't talk about specific design or technical practices that you should do, it became very easy to sell to organizations, to people, to business people who understand processes, understand people, know less about software, but I also understand that if you have a certification of some kind, that means you're pretty good. And Scrum certifications become very popular in the last 5 years. So my little point here is when you get a trainers, consultant going into the organization, don't just check their certifications. But assuming that you have checked and they're okay, then you have a training and consulting team that really works with the people of the organization from top to bottom, and in the new ways, and teaching them the new ways, and making sure they're right on the correct track. I have seen, however, things recently that really, when I saw that for the first time, I didn't understand what's going on, but after thinking about it, actually made sense. And that is when some organizations taking on Agile, basically they're taking on Scrum, and they actually say on the next phase, or the phase after that, which is 6 months or 1 year from now, then we're also going to train the development teams in this new Agile thing. Now, the first time I heard it I said, well, really? That's not what Agile is about. The Agile Manifesto talks about working software. How do you get to working software without the developers? But again, I thought about it, and it made sense. So if you have an organization that has, I don't know, more than 500 people, and all these transitions take time, you do it the way you did in the past, and that means you start at the top, you train the top managers, and they train their subordinates, and so on, 4 layers in the organization, and therefore it trickles down and will get there like any other process. If this kind of excuse sounds good to you, yeah, it still sounds the same to me. It's pretty moronic to do one thing without the other. it's the other way around. It's also something that is a bit problematic, but leaving development out of Agile implementation is pretty stupid. I can tell them I said so. Now, after all this brief introduction, we can actually start talking about how you can start improving by looking at different facets of your way of life when you start introducing Agile methodologies. I'm going to mix sometimes Agile with Scrum, but of course they're not the same. But hey, most of the world does it. So let's do it. I'm going to talk about the different these four facets you see before you. I'm going to start with results, start with the end in mind, because this is basically what we want. We want working software. I'm going to talk about communications. Communication, which is basically the facilitator of everything else, including working software at the end. Feedback, different types of feedback in the process, and visibility. I'm going to start, like I said, with results. Agile Manifesto talks about we want working software over anything else. Now, I used to be, I'm going to give you examples from my own past at the end. And I used to be a project manager in a former company which developed software as part of a multi-continent project that was 3 or 4 years in the making. We were doing all kind of stuff for a year before we actually showed a prototype to someone else. And imagine how does it look from the other side, from the business side, that your team is working on something and you don't see anything for a complete year. Yes, we're talking about showing your software. It needs to be deployed. It's not something that you're going to show from your Visual Studio, for example. Unless you really have to, but most of the time you don't. That means that if your software comes packaged as an installation file, you start from there. Or even better, if your consumer, your customer, is going to download this executable from a website, deploy it on the site and start from there. You need to get as close as you can to the customer experience when you're showing the software. It's pretty obvious why. You want the best feedback you get, and once you remove things out of context, you get feedback which is out of context, which is not that useful. So that's obviously the thing. If you have a website which is your product, again, try to deploy it to a web server which is as close as the customer can get. And that means on a pre-production server, if it's not ready yet, on a production server, if you're really brave, there's something called a continuous delivery, when you can every cycle the site is deployed. So if you want to get feedback, do it on somebody else's computer. You don't want to hear that old lame excuse worked on my computer, and well, you will, but hopefully not a lot. And get it as close to the customer as you can. Once you're able to do this, do it iteratively. Again, it's obvious the way Agile works. Agile works during over iterations. Do demos over iteration. We're going to talk about demos a bit later. Do this presentation of what works every iteration. Don't think that if you miss one, that's okay. It's not okay. First of all, it's very important to keep a very specific rhythm in your project, and we're going to talk about ceremonies, and demo is one of them. It's something that you do every time on over every specific bit of time. Everyone gets used to it. Everyone spends time working towards it, including the one you're going to show this to. So he's going to schedule in his calendar time to review your app and give you feedback. The more you spread out the showing the result, the more out of context you get. We've had some iterations where we missed doing the demo. And when we did, it took 3 iterations worth of feedback, and now we had to separate things that we actually worked on the iteration, things that were outside, things that we didn't remember putting in, stuff like that, putting in one rhythm. Now the other point here about iteration and about delivering software is that, like I said, our result is working software. Now testers are also part of the team optimally. If you have them on your team, they're part of your Agile team, and that means they're part of the iteration. Their tasks, if it's possible, that's not always possible, in order to get to a working software at the end of the iteration, is to plan the tests, test the package, and then obviously retest after the developers fix their bugs. It's all part of the iteration. Now, unfortunately, most organizations still haven't made this transition to form the teams in this way, and that means that testers usually are in another group or maybe in another continent, and depending on your authority and what your role is, what you should do then is communicate with the team and try to make the shorter distance between you delivering an iteration's worth of results and then starting to test it, because otherwise everybody knows what's happened. You finish the iterations on January 31st. They start testing on March 1st to a month later, and then they find a bug and they go to the developers, and the developers say, well, it's not a bug, and they go back and it is a bug, and then the developers need to stop doing whatever they're doing and try to remember what they did 2 months ago, and this obviously brings down the velocity, and you spend more time on fixing the bugs and developing the new features because you bounce between 2 tasks. If you have this option to make these changes, do them. That's all I have to say about results, except provide them. I want to talk about a bit communication, because it's funny, because if you read the Agile Manifesto, you won't find the word there. It's the basis. It's everything that you get out of any Agile methodology, including the working software, is based on communication. Doing it alone is not going to cut it. I want to tell you a story about again my dark past. In this project where I was managing a software team. This was one software team out of 2, and in the product, which was a medical instrument, there was also a hardware group, a chemistry group, a biology group, another group that did all the regulation stuff for the FDA because it was a medical instrument, and I think that was it. And there was a testing, a whole QA section that dealt with it. Now, a year, basically, when I went to show this prototype a year into the project, I went to the company's headquarters, and they took me on a field trip to go to a customer's lab. This was this was my first visit into a customer's lab, and that was after 4 years of writing software for an organization that write software for labs for a business. Now, when I saw what happening there, things clicked in my head. I finally understood why I needed touchscreen on the instrument, because there was no place to put a mouse there. It was so crowded. And because these labs are so crowded, they are usually dependent on automation or in communication with other systems in the lab to get access to the instrument. Now, this made the specification and requirements for the automation and connectivity thing much more important in my eyes from what it was before. Before it was just a side task. Yeah, we also need to support this kind of protocol. But seeing it in my eyes, I actually saw the relevance. Now, back to our days. What do I mean by that? You need to talk to people. You need to go talk to customers. You need to talk to other groups as well. And the more you do, you'll get more insight about your product and you'll get it better. Now, you don't have to be a product owner or a product manager to do this. You can be a developer. You can visit this kind of lab and look at the instrument and say, hey, something is wrong here, but what we're doing. We actually need to put more attention to certain tasks. And this will actually make a better product, because once you convince people to do this, you get much better results. And yes, once you start talking with other people, you get into the realm of politics. Now, politics basically doesn't have a very good rep, mainly because of politicians. But inside an organization, basically, when you start talking to other people, they will start talking to you. You'll get more collaboration they'll get more collaboration with you, and you're going to get the same thing from them. And the end result is a better product. Yes, you'll also find who's going to counter you at every point in the process, but hey, that's good to know, isn't it? Something you can deal with. So I made a short list of who I think you should talk to, and this obviously a very, very, very short list. Start talking to people. Don't stay in the cubicles and just write software. What you'll get at the end, if you're not talking to other people, is something that the customer probably doesn't want, or something that let's say that the release team will not be able to build and configure very easily, or the compliance team will not really have enough information to do the regulation stuff. Talk to as many people as you can, regardless of what your role in the project is. It's funny because when you read about Agile, we're talking about whole team, and the whole team needs to be represented in the team, or everyone, and this usually doesn't happen, and unfortunately, but it's very hard to get all these kind of people in one room every day to talk to each other, and that's why you need to get a bit out of your Agile circle and ask the people, ask questions, show them the demos, and get feedback, and just increase the circle as you go on. One more thing about communication. The Agile Manifesto talks about individuals over processes, and I see many times that you start from waterfall and you move to Agile, and you read the Agile Manifesto and you say, of course, individuals and people are much more important than processes, and then you put Agile processes in there, and you do it for a reason, for a good reason. The reason we have ceremonies, for example, in Scrum, is a framework that you can use that facilitates this communication. like stand-up meetings. It's ceremony. Talk about it later. Very easy to do, and like a formula, you do it, and it guarantees, or sort of guarantees, you get better visibility. However, these are still processes, and you still need to remember, even those are agile processes, individuals come first. I'll give you an example. Today at Typemock we do stand-up meetings at 9:30 in the morning, and who's ever there at this time shows up, and those who don't. We do it without them. We didn't have it like this. We tried it in different ways. Before that, we tried to get everyone there at 9:30. Didn't work. People are like that. We tried moving the meeting to a bit later time in the day, but this already made a problem for the people who were there from early in the morning, who were working, which was 4 or 5 hours into the day for them, and some people were already booked for meetings because it wasn't the beginning of the day anymore. So what we decided is that yes, it's important to have the stand-up, and but people are more important. So what we do is two things. First, we have this at 9:30, and who's there is going to be representing himself, will be representing himself, and the other people who are not there have a responsibility to catch up by themselves. And this is about management and growing people, but yes, it's about taking responsibility, and they need to do it because they need to also know what happens. So they need to catch up. It's not an optimal world out there, and you need to fit it to what you can. So I think that's what I had about communication. The more communication, the better. Talk to other people. Let's talk about feedback. Feedback is something that is there in the heart of any agile methodology in every kind of level. It starts when the developer builds his projects and looks at the compilation result. That's a feedback, saying if everything compiles. And it goes way back to where you actually show a demo to the customer at the end of the iteration. And it tells you whether it likes it or not, or what. There are different cycles of feedback, different practices that encourage feedback. And without feedback, we're actually working in the dark, and that's why we like feedback. I'm going to give you my points of where the feedback works the most. You can actually find yourself in different feedback cycles, but these are the things that are easier to do, and they are the most effective. I'm going to start with what you see on the screen, which is code review. When people ask me what is the most effective way, what is the most effective practice you could introduce to a non-agile organization, which will have the best effect, and they expect me to say unit testing, but before that I say code reviews. You look at the code, and every developer who's listening to this knows that you look at the code and you actually know how much a mess we're in just by looking at it. The more we look at the code, the more we review the code, we understand it better, we fix it. It encourages us to actually to improve what we can. Obviously, code review has the effect of making the code better, improving the code, finding bugs just by looking at the code and fixing them, raising the quality altogether. But this is my basic feedback mechanism, and if you can actually manage to do pair programming, and by manage I mean either a guerrilla style, with like, hey, can you sit with me here and working on this feature, or if you already got permission from management that this is the way you're doing stuff. That's even better because 2 people are better than 1. It's not that the task will take half the time. It usually won't. But what you will have is that you'll increase your velocity because the task will be done, and more people will know the code in order for the next task to get easier, and you'll find many more bugs before you can actually need to fix them just by having another eye there. So that's code review, and after that comes the automation. If you're not putting automation in your development cycle, you're doing it wrong. Uncle Bob Martin said once that testers who's doing things that can be automated are actually doing immoral things. It's immoral to make them do this. And I basically agree with him. In terms of feedback, this would be your pulse of the project. You actually need to know where your project is. This is it. You have an automatic build server. It's a different machine, a separate machine from the one that you develop on, that anyone develops on. First thing you do is build everything, compile everything on this machine, and get a report. And you do it every day or automatically on changes of on the source control. And you look at the report and say everything's cool. Next thing to do is add tests. You run the unit tests or integrations and acceptance tests, and you add to this, and you get a better feedback, and you know what's working and what's not. And more importantly, when it's not, you actually know immediately. You don't need to wait. You don't get surprised later. You actually get the results there and then. If you want more information about unit tests, obviously come to typemock.com. A lot of information there. This is what we actually do. Demo to customers. I talked about it earlier. Demos are very important. I know that it's part of what we're doing today, which really makes our products better. And we show it to internally at first, but very quickly we get this out. So everything new gets another eye, and this is something, for example, actually mentioned it today. Typemock is building tools for developers. So we're actually developers building tools for other developers. Therefore, we think that we are our own customers. Therefore, we know exactly what our customers want. Wrong. Even in this very optimal case that we are the developers, we know how our customer thinks and feels. We are wrong because we're not them, and that's why we want to demo it to customers, our prospects, or design partners. Show it internally at first, but then show it to real users. Get real feedback, and this feedback you need to listen to. Understand what's really being asked, analyze it, and then you prioritize it into the list. Now, I'm not saying that every one of us is a product owner or a product manager that can actually have the authority to do this. But like I said, you don't have to be. If you feel there's something that we're not putting enough attention to, or that will make the product better, go talk to the product owner and try to convince him. If he's not hot-headed like me, he may be listen. He may listen and may change his mind. You do what you can to get working software that the customer wants. Okay, my last part of this will be talking about visibility. Now, Agile is very famous about doing this thing that getting things to the surface. It's not that any agile methodology guarantees that you'll fix everything. But the facilities are there to bring problem things to the surface, things that we might not even want to talk about. But once they're there and they're out there, we can actually deal with them. So I'm going to talk about a few of these things. Let's start with estimations. Now, there are books about agile planning, and if you read more, you'll read about release planning, which is not getting that many attention. You also hopefully disregarded the myth there's no planning in Agile. Okay, there are questions I'm going to answer at the end. If you have some, write them in the question box. I'll try to get to everyone later on, because I will do that, hopefully. I was talking about estimation, and why is that important? Because yes, we know that it will be done when it's done. May sound okay inside your Agile team, but it's not for the rest of the business. You should remember that there are other parts of the corporation that actually working towards your product release, and they're actually going to do something about it. For example, when you deliver the software, the marketing team is going to market it start doing their efforts a month before that, and start preparing 2 months before that. They need to know when it's going to be ready. When it's done, the sales and support teams already needs to be trained on it so they can help customers. Leaving it just inside the Agile team, in the Agile team's hands, and saying we'll be ready when we're ready, kind of irritates other people. So, in order not to go there, what I expect estimations to be, and I've been a developer, I gave estimations. I'm now at the other hand, I can tell you how it sounds like. When you give estimations of how things are going to be, make it real. Analyze it and make it real. And if you mostly have some kind of unknown and risks involved, put the buffer inside your estimations. Now, the most important thing, which unfortunately falls on the shoulders of the developers, is to match expectations. Here's an example. I used to be a developer, right? I know what I'm talking about. And there's a feature, and I look at the feature and say, well, it's not going to take more than 2 days. I used to do this three years ago. The developer looks at this and says, no, it's not. It's going to take, if we're lucky, 2 weeks. Now, what happens if these two don't talk to each other? It obviously takes 3 weeks. The developer says, this guy, the product manager, the product owner, doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know software at all. The product owner says, this developer should have done this in 2 days, and it took him 3 weeks. It's not very competent, is he? And there lies, begins or continues to be, a very big distrust between the two sides. And the more out of sync these things get more and more distrust inside the team or between the rest of the business and the team itself. And unfortunately, because the people who are actually doing the work are the developers, it's their responsibility to match the expectations. They need to go and explain why it will take 2 weeks. Now, a number of things can happen after that. It could be that the product owner gets very upset, but then he faces reality. He can say, well, okay, it's going to be 2 weeks. Well, That's what it's going to take. And maybe there'll be some kind of negotiations on scope, because the product owner can take 2 weeks to do this. So again, it's part of the it falls on the shoulders of the developers to actually match expectations upwards to the rest of the business. Once you have these estimations, you can have a plan, and then you put the plan on the wall where everyone can see and everyone can ask. And yes, everyone can ask, and you should actually let people ask questions. How long is it going to take? Is it really that what's going to take? What do you need in order to make it quicker? You actually need to answer these questions. I see that there might be some static on the audio. I apologize for that. Try to mend it. But if not, I'll just shout louder. One thing that that I can tell you is that there are some kind of agile management tools out there. We tried a couple. We're actually trying one now. But there's one advice here. If you're just starting out, start with the simple stuff, which is either sticky notes, which worked for us for a while until they started falling down, or just writing stuff on a whiteboard. Once you get into the feel of things and you actually know how things are going for you in terms of practice, in day to day, then you can actually look at the tools and see what's right for you. It doesn't make sense to actually start with buying a very big tool for a lot of dollars and then realizing that you don't need half of what it gives you. Okay, so once you have the plan on the wall, you can do stand-up meetings near them. Now, stand-up meeting is the most effective way I found to actually know what's happening in the project, and the most efficient one. I get much more than 10 minutes a day being part of the stand-up meeting for 5 days than doing one weekly meeting for an hour. It's very easy to do. It's a ceremony. For people who don't do it, basically what Scrum defines as a stand-up is basically a meeting, a very short meeting, where everyone stands up, doesn't sit down, and doesn't tell stand-up jokes, and everyone in its turn answers 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And are you blocked in some way? And you stand and you tell what you did and what you're going to do, and ask for help if you need. And if you're not talking at the time, listen and ask for help if you can. This is very effective to finding things in the process that don't work, raising problems and fixing them immediately. Don't make it long. If there's a side discussion that needs to be discussed, take it offline for immediately after the meeting, but just do it. Look at the wall, look at the plan, and make sure that the tasks you're working are there, and not you've just invented a new one which is not there. Okay, final thing I want to talk about is retrospective. Good books about it, of course. I think by Esther Derby. Retrospective is a meeting that you're doing every iteration in the end of the iteration, where you look at the things that you've done and think about the things that made things work for you, which you want to continue doing, and things that didn't work for you, which you want to improve. Now, by the way, it's not just for the Agile team. This is something that can work for everyone. We have a management team retrospective every month with the same format because we want to improve. This is the most effective thing we want to improve. By the way, in a former company we had something like that was called a postmortem and didn't involve bodies, thank God. It usually happened when something awful happened. It didn't happen a lot, but it did sometimes. But then you had to, and you wanted to understand what actually happened, and you went on and collected information for over 2 years, and analyze it and munch about it and think about what would you do different. It's effective, but doing it this iteratively is much more effective because the time span is much shorter. You can actually think about what happened in this not very long and put it on the board. Schedule it appropriately. That means that if you have an iteration of a week, you probably don't need unless there's something very interesting that happened during this iteration, 30 to 45 minutes is enough. If you do it monthly, you probably need an hour and a half or more to do it. Take action items. This meeting is the most effective meeting type I know, because this is where you think about what can actually make your process better, either by doing more of stuff or doing stuff otherwise. It's so damn obvious that you actually, if there are any action items taken this month, these are the things that you need to review. So take these as action items and actually review the next time. And it's very interesting to look at these things. If you actually did this and follow up and the results improved, you deserve a high five. If you didn't give this enough attention, you need to review it as well. Maybe it wasn't as important as you thought it was. And maybe it was and you dropped it, and there's another problem that hampered you, and that's why you didn't do it. So this is, I think, the most effective meeting there is. Write it down, write it down, write it down. Okay. Let's see if I have more slides, summary. Yeah, I want to summarize. Before going into questions, most of the world is going agile. That's a very big most. No, not most of the world is going agile, but many of the organizations are aware of it, are aware that it is more successful than the way they were doing business before that, and it's able to help them bring things to the surface and provide those who understand it working software which fits their customers. It's hard. We're talking about changes in the way, large changes from the way that you used to work before if you're starting out. Especially if you're doing a lot of changes in one shot. In big organization, that's why it takes so long. We know that people, slow is fast and fast is slow. You need to do stuff slow in order to get ahead quickly. It is worth it. Best way I know today to deliver software. And finally, there's the technical stuff and there's the procedural stuff. Do both. If you're just doing one of them, you miss out on stuff, and basically you're shooting yourself in the leg. Now, final thing I want to tell you before I just answer any questions is that Typemock.com has a lot of information about both Agile and unit testing and this technical stuff we'd always talk about. Go there, follow us on Twitter, download our products. Hopefully you'll have a better unit testing experience than you had before. And now if you have questions, put them please in the question box, and I'm going to try to start answering questions depending on how tough the question is. How overall architecture can fit into the steps of a larger organization? That's a very, very, very big question. I don't really know how to answer this question. I can tell you about things that didn't work for me before and things that work for me today. One project I had, it's something like this big project, that's the second one. We spent months designing the architecture. Part of this month were putting infrastructure in place. So all these things went into work. We built great frameworks we can work on, and like I said, the customers saw the prototype only a year later. They were pissed because we spent a lot of work on infrastructure. Now, of course, obviously thinking about how the system actually needs to be architected and designed is not something that you leave to the end. And many people try and many people fail when they're trying to evolve their design. There's a lot of ways you can actually facilitate that, like having tests in place. But in the end, what matters most is not the architecture. It's what the customer gets. So think about how you can deliver software into the hands of the customer quickly, with quality, and all the infrastructure won't help you if you miss your deadline. So put the customer first. I hope I answered this, because this is I can spend an hour talking just about this. Let me see, next question. Will the slides be forwarded to entities? Both this recording and the slides are going to be at the Typemock site. So hopefully by tomorrow. So I invite you to come back, and it's going to be there either tomorrow or the next day. What is the best artifact that one can offer as a side-by-side comparison to demonstrate agile planning compared to other methods? Oh, another one-day course. You don't need a side-by-side comparison between anything. There's how you worked until now, and now how you're going to work from now on. Like software that works, a process that works has the best proof in it that it works. So you want to start out doing iterations, fine, do iterations, do the iteration planning, put the plan on the wall, commit to it. It's very, very, very important that you can commit it, and hopefully demonstrate at the end what you committed for. If not, you communicate at in the middle that you won't be able to do some stuff, you reduce scope, and still you deliver something at the end. The most important stuff, the most effective thing to do to reduce tension, to reduce any fear and uncertainty, is to show results. So the planning, basically, if you think about it, it's irrelevant. Yes, plan is something that you actually show someone else to reduces their uncertainty and their trust that they need. This is something that you're actually going to do. But an iteration plan which you can actually work with and produce something at the end is much better than a project plan for 3 years that everybody throws away the minute it's published. So the most important things are results. What do you think on combining agile processes and CMMI? Oh, science fiction question. I know there are things like that. I know the PMI now gives agile certifications. CMMI, it's okay. Kidding aside, it's very much possible to do both. It just depends on the level of documentation and proof that you need to provide for level 3. Level 3 is just, it's not that hard to get by. But even CMMI level 5, although requires much more documentation and much more details, it's not going head-to-head with Agile. You need to document more of what you do in order to provide enough to get the certification. It's a lot of effort, which frankly sometimes you don't really need. But when I'm saying you don't need, it's not that you, the developer, don't need. You probably don't need it. But organizations sometimes needs their CMMI certification to do other stuff as well, to conduct business. And therefore, they're not conflicting. You can do both, and you can actually do it. Self-management on the idea that Agile does in fact plan and not iterate endlessly. How does one persuade management at the beginning rather than the end? This is going back to my my answer about planning. Plan for a short time. If you've been doing work for 2 years and the management is not really sold on what you're actually doing right now, do something for a week or 2 weeks. Commit to what you're going to prove and show that at the end. So taking this very short periods and showing value in them raises the trust of the rest of management with you. And over time, you'll get more trust and more freedom to do these things. I know that that's what helped us get out of a rut where we had a very big tension between our software development organization and management in the company's headquarters. And just by showing results, we reduced this tension, and we were given much more freedom to do what we can later. How should a Scrum Master function in a team that is obviously weak and is at high risk of failing the project? Oh, okay. My favorite answer for my days as a project manager, it really depends. I can't really answer this question. First of all, I'm not a Scrum Master. I don't aspire to be a Scrum Master. What used to work is, and it's basically the same answer that I gave before. You need to take small steps in order to induce confidence in the team that they can do stuff in order for them to do more later. And in order to do it in small iterations, make them commit and start providing producing results. It won't help while the whole project is failing. But if this is the resources that you have to work with, this is what you need to build on. It's basically a term that I really dislike, team building, but this is the job of the team leader rather than the Scrum Master to actually make it possible for the team to actually start producing results. How much time would you spend in a project to the overhead of the planning? Let's see, for iteration of a week today, we spend something between, I think the average is something like 3 hours, depending on the task that's going in there. But it varies. It could be that you're starting a new feature and you need to break it down a lot more, or you're just completing and your iteration is just fixing bugs, which are a lot easier to analyze and estimate. So the average for us, for a team of 7-8 developers, over a week, something like 3 hours. I got time for a very short answer for the last question, so write it now if you want to. In a nutshell, which is a very good start for a question, how can you use an Agile framework in a fixed price contract project which normally requires that all requirements are up front? I don't know much about it. I know people are doing it. If you write me later or contact me through Twitter, I can probably direct you to some consultants who implement Agile and actually doing it this way in fixed price, or what they can do to negotiate stuff like that. It's a whole new world for us, this whole fixed price Agile thing, and everyone's trying to learn how to do it effectively. Please write me. I'll try to connect you with someone who knows about these things much better than I do. Okay, I'm going to cut this now. If you have any other questions, I'm going to be on Twitter, and you have my email on the screen. I'll try to ask questions, and if I don't know the answers, I'll try to let you. I'll try to find someone who does and can help you. So for this time, have a nice day, evening, or something else wherever you are. And I'll probably see you soon in a month in another webinar. So bye-bye now.